Hi, this is Andrew. Thanks for joining me. This video is about Windows shares, how to create them, how to access them, and really how the permissions work within Windows shares, because we're looking at permissions in a couple of different ways. So to get started, I have my domain controller on the left side here. This has Active Directory installed, obviously. It is the only domain controller in my environment. It's class.local. I have a hard drive here on the domain controller. And this is where I'm going to be sharing files from. Now, in the real world, you would probably have a separate server for your file shares. You don't want to do that on your domain controller unless you have a very small environment. We have a very small environment, a test environment, and we're not worried about best practices. Even in a small environment at this point, you'd probably want to have a separate server. So, first thing we're going to do is create a share. So I'm going to start out by just creating a place to put my shares before we start sharing folders. And I'm going to call it share. I'll call it share. I'm not actually going to share this folder. This folder is going to contain all of the folders that I'm going to share. So we'll get to it later on, but the reason I'm going to do this, I could have QC, I could have QA, sales, HR, all of these shares in here. Each share controlled or accessed by a different group. But now I can just back up this one directory because everything lives under that. So we have a QC share. I'm going to go to Properties and Sharing. There are other ways to do it, and I'll show you those ways in a few minutes. But first thing I'm going to do is just share this directory. So I have the QC folder directory, same thing, and I look at permissions. By default, everyone has read control. That's not what I'm looking for here. If that's what you're looking for, it's all set. You can move on. But that's not what I'm looking for here. I want to remove everyone, and I want to add only the QC group. So I have QC, and now QC, and I want to give them change access from the share permissions. So I can apply everything. Now, I'm going to actually put a file in here. I'll just do a new text file and we'll call it test1. And then I'll go in here and say, this is a test. So here's my file. Now, I gave permissions to the QC. I gave share permissions to the QC group. And later on, I'll show you a kind of a better way of doing that. But if we look here, QC group, share permissions. So in the QC group, if I go here, I have one account, and that is Fred. So over on my Windows 10 system here, I will do a CMD. Let's try it the other way, run CMD. And who am I? You can see that I am logged in on the domain as Fred. So that means I should be able to access this QC share. So let's see if that works. I'm going to go, again, a couple of ways to do it. I'm going to go to File Explorer. And if this domain controller on the left had a standard name like DC1 or East or something like that, I could just type it in here, / with the name. Since it doesn't, it has kind of an AWS created generic longer name. I'm just going to do the IP address because that's easier. Now, when I do the IP address, it lists out all of the shares that are on the server on this IP address. QC, and then I also have the default Windows shares. So I go into QC. There's the test I created. So I can go into this as a test. And let's say I wanted to, this is still a test, make a change to this file. Now I can do that, and I can select save, and it doesn't let me. This is its way of saying, no, you're not allowed to do that. It's kind of an odd situation. So instead of doing that, I'm going to close it, don't save. What if I try to delete it? I don't have permissions. And if you think back, I gave the QC group permissions to do those things on the sharing side. But, see, I have read and change. That gives me rights to do everything. But on the NTFS side, the file permissions, I don't have full permissions. So Fred is a member of also the users group, and that's where he gets these permissions. And if you look at the permissions that users have, read, list folders, read, there's a special permissions here, and if I want to see the special permissions, I can actually take a look. I can see effective access. I'm going to see what kind of access Fred has, and it shows there. And he can read stuff, he can do stuff. The strange one, the special permissions, is actually creating files and folders. So Fred can create files and folders, but he does not have permissions to delete or to change permissions or to write anything to the file. So that's why I'm getting that issue. So what we want to do is, in this case, I'm going to go in and I'm going to add the QC group here. Check names, QC, and now I will give the modify permission there. And now I can go back here and I can open up the file. And this is a second test. So now when I try to save it, it lets me save. If I go back and look at it on this side, I can see that I was able to save it because I have NTFS permissions and share permissions. And when you're accessing a share, what you get is the more restrictive of those two. Although oddly enough, if you look at any of those permissions, if I go here and I look at let's do it from the folder level. If I look at these permissions and I look at security, Fred gets all of the permissions that add up. So if he's a member of QC, he gets these permissions. If he's a member of users, he gets those permissions, and they all add up. Same on the share. If he, for some reason, was getting permissions as one thing in the share and then was a member of another group, it adds up, and that he gets the total of those permissions. But once you take those totals, it is the more restrictive of the two. So just like if he does not have permissions to on the NTFS side, we can do the same thing from the share permission side. I just removed the write permission, and now if I go here and I say new text document, it doesn't let me because he doesn't have permissions to do that. So Fred is a member of the group, and he can get permissions to write to the share, but still not have NTFS. Or he could have NTFS, but not permissions to the share. You need both in order to do something. So even if I went a step further and said he couldn't read the directory from NTFS, he wouldn't even be able to see what's inside of it. So to simplify things, what you normally do is you give the permissions you need on the NTFS side. You give the permissions unless you need something very granular, like the ability to create files in here but not change existing files. So if you have a standard share, you either have read-write permissions on it or read-only permissions. And we could say we have a QA group here. QC should be able to write to this directory. So we'll change our permissions to make it look like that. So we have that, and now Fred can go in here and he can create a new file. This is test2 and this is test2 file, and we can do anything we want in here with that. But if we were to log in as the QA group and we go in here and we say, I'm going to go back to sharing and advanced sharing and permissions, and I want to change I want to change this so that the QA group can read what's in here, but not change anything. So the QA has just read, so they can go into this directory and they can read the data that QC is creating, but they can't actually change it. A better way to do it, a more common practice from what I found, is that you create a separate group. So the problem here is you could have the QC group could have access to 5 different directories or 5 different shares, and the QA group could have 10 different shares, and you don't really know what they can access without going through a full system audit. So instead of using the QA group and the QC group in that way, I'm going to create a new group. So I go in here, I create a new group, and I'm going to call this QC underscore share underscore RO for read only. And I'm going to create another one called new group QC underscore share underscore RW for read write. Now I have these 2 groups, and what I'm going to do is give those permissions on the share. So I go to the share, and I can say permissions and remove these 2. I don't want to give them directly. I want to do QC underscore share, and I'll do a check names on that. And I'm actually going to select both of them. And okay, now the read only gets obviously read only. The read write, we can check off read write. Now we can, and one more piece, let's go in here and let's change this NTFS permission. So I want to say that users can do anything in here from an NTFS side because they're restricted on the share side. So now I go to the QC share read only, and I'm going to go to members, and I'm going to add the QA group to that. And then I go to the QC share read write, and I'm going to add the QC group to that. So what's happening now is that the QC group gets permissions, share permissions to this share through the QC share read write, and the QA group gets through the QC share read only. So if for some reason someone came along and said, I need read access to the QC data, and that could be any other group. That could be manufacturing needs to see QC data, but not change it. You could go in and just say, okay, I'm going to add manufacturing in there, or I'm going to add sales in there because this is information that they need to do things. And I don't believe I have a sales group, so that's not where it would go. It would go here. So if I type sales and I have a sales group, I could create it there. So that is a common way of creating shares and accessing shares. Now, one other thing I want to show you. If we are logged in now as Fred, who is a member of the QC group. So I want to log in as Mary, who's a member of the QA group, just so you can see how the read-only looks. Now, we just saw it, but we'll take a look at it again. I'm going to log out of the system, log back in as Mary, and we'll be back. Okay, so I'm logged in as Mary, and if I go to my command prompt, I can show you, it says right there, but who am I is Mary in the class domain. And Mary is a member of QA. And we saw earlier that Mary gets permissions to the QC directory through that QC share read only. So if I go and from File Explorer, I will type in the IP address here. 72.16.123.155. And if I wanted to, I could type the full path here and say QC. And Mary can go in here and look at the files. She has read access to everything, but she does not have permissions to create a file in here. Now, let's say I'm logged in as Mary and I want to be able to access this, and I want to say, I want to do this as a different user. Well, there's something we can do there. So I can go back to File Explorer, and I'm actually going to try to map a network drive. And when I do the map a network drive, it gives me another option. I can connect using different credentials. And I'm not going to reconnect at sign in, but now I'm going to type in the 172.16 123.155. And I'm going to do QC. So anytime, or right now, that should create a Z drive pointing there. If I did the check box, then anytime I logged in, it would log in and connect. Now it's saying different credentials. I'm going to use, instead of Mary, I'm going to use Fred here. And log in with Fred's account. And now it has me connecting as Fred, and I can create a document because now I'm connected as Fred. Now there might be times that I'm connected as Fred and I need to not be connected as Fred. I need to be connected as Mary. And I can go here and I can see how I'm connected to things. I can type the command netuse. And this will show me that I am connected to this, using the Z drive to this, to that server. I'm going to disconnect. And when I go back here, it doesn't show the connection anymore. Now, if for some reason it was still connected, depending on the version of Windows, it might take a little bit longer. I can use netuse and do a /delete and then do 172.123.155, and it would be QC. So I can delete the connection. It's not found anymore, so it's not a problem. But now if I go back here, I'm going to be connecting again as Mary. So I'll go back to that and create a new document. And again, now I'm Mary connected to this server, and it's not letting me do things. So it's a way of connecting as different users. More frequently used in a test environment than in a real-world environment, because a real-world environment, Mary is logged into this computer. She's sitting at this desk. She's the only one who sits at the desk, or she's the one who's logged into this computer. If Fred comes along and needs to log into this computer or needs to do things, best practice is for Mary to log out and for Fred to log in. You should not have Fred sitting down and trying to connect to a server as himself to access things when Mary's logged in. It's just general security best practices. So as you're playing around with different accounts, you may need to use that netuse command to delete a connection if it's still staying there. It's not always a situation you need to do that, but just keep that in mind. And you can always see what your network connections are using netuse. And there's a lot more that it can do with that. So one more thing. If we wanted to create a shared directory, I already showed you how to do it from here. There is one other way to create a shared directory, at least. This is frequently more common. If we go to computer management, we can see all of our shared directories. So if I go to shares here, these are the Windows administrative shares. And again, if I wanted to try to connect as a domain administrative account, I could access the share. I could even get to the C drive, which would let me then get to this share through the file system a different way. But if I wanted to create a new share here, I want a QA share now. I do new share, and I type QA. Folder path. I don't want the share to be QA. I want the share to be in the share directory and a new folder in there called QA. So there's my folder. It's selected and share QA, and then the name of the share is QA, and this is where I can set permissions. I'm going to customize and remove. Now I need to add. So what do? I go back to Active Directory, users and computers. I say I need a new group. This is going to be QA _ share _ read write. Let's say I don't need a read only. I just need read write. I'm still going to give it that name. And I'm going to add the QA group to this. Now, whether a group gets read-write or read-only, those are business decisions. Those are decisions that you can make, that a business will make to say this is how we need people to do their job. But from a cybersecurity perspective, you're the one who has to implement what those decisions are. So now I can go here, QA, QA share, and then change, and now finish, and finish. So now I have this QA share created. So I showed you you can create it from directly from the location on the hard drive, right click properties and sharing, or you can go to computer management and shares. And from here you can even see who's connected to shares and what files they have opened. So it really can help you see what's happening with shared directories from the server side. So that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching.